Hi, this is Misha. Today's video is on quite an interesting rifle variant that came into the country in small numbers for a very brief period of time. You just saw us firing it here. This is an Arsenal SLR-105. Specifically, this is the A1 variant. It is built in Bulgaria. I just have it in a original drop case here. Thought it'd be worth having some stuff on the table with it. I didn't tie it up. Okay. So in the case we have the rifle, and then there's also a spot for one mag, so you have a mag with you if you had the case. This is just a typical Bakelite style AG4. Also on the table, just to have some stuff out, we have a Russian 3-pocket pouch from the 80s and a Bulgarian copy of the Russian 4-pocket design, and a Circle 10 bayonet. The AK74 bayonet's very similar to the AKM, just a little bit different for fitting the muzzle device. Now, we have videos on the history of the AK74, and in fact this rifle is predominantly featured in that, so this isn't about the AK74 military variants. This is specifically about the SLR-105. It's a really interesting series. Arsenal's history in the U.S. dates back to the late 90s. The very first Bulgarian-produced Arsenal guns came in under various importers, first as the SA-93, then the SLR-95. Then Arsenal Incorporated, Arsenal Inc. of Las Vegas, got going, and they would do the 95s, the 101s. All of these would be stamped receiver guns. And all of these, with the exception of the earliest SA-93s, would be imported during the federal assault weapons ban. In 2004, this ban was allowed to sunset. I believe it was September 19th, 2004? It was September of 2004 for sure. Now, right before the ban was about to come off, Arsenal announced it had some new products. One of them was the SLR-105, which was a Bulgarian import. It was their first gun in 5.45 by 39 caliber. It was also the first Arsenal to have a stamped receiver. Now, Arsenal was banking on the assault weapons ban not being renewed. They were banking on its sunset. And they were, a week or two before, they were saying as soon as the ban comes off, we're ready to ship guns with folding stocks, bayonet lugs, threaded muzzles with removable devices, so on and so forth. Now, what I found interesting about the SLR-105, this is the A1 version. It has a removable AK74 break on 24 millimeter threads. We have a bayonet lug under the sight base here. We don't have the accessory lug, but the stud for it's there. We take high capacity magazines, standard magazines, as you see. Now, there is a version simply called the SLR-105 that does not have this front assembly. Instead, it has a neutered front sight tower without bayonet lug and without threads. You would assume those came in during the ban. However, all SLR-105s, no matter what, came in and were sold after the sunset of the assault weapons ban. Now remember, just because the assault weapons ban sunset and we can now have bayonet lugs, folding stocks, and so on, the 1989 Bush executive order banning the importation of so-called assault rifles, including Kalashnikov variants, was still in effect. So for import, these still had to come in neutered, essentially, and with thumbhole stocks. Now the first ones, once in the USA, Arsenal would leave neutered up front, although they would take off the thumbhole stock and they would put on a pistol grip and fixed military buttstock. They would sell these And people would ask, why aren't you converting the front ends? And the response was a couple of things. One, they said they wanted to keep the cost down. The initial projected cost for the SLR-105 was about $450, $500 in late 2004. They also pointed out the fact that some states like New Jersey and New York kept the assault weapons ban going at a state level. So the featureless SLR-105 would be still able to be sold in those states at that time. They also pointed out the fact that it would add money to take off the neutered front sight base and then put on the full-featured one in the USA. I also want to suspect that maybe they didn't have full front sight bases and muzzle brakes at that time. Either way, the very first SLR-105s shipped in late 2004. Some sources say October, some say December, but towards the end of the year. As soon as they introduced the first one, just about a month later, they would also introduce the SLR-105R, which this one is not. It would have a standard scope rail riveted on the side here. And then in 2005, the gun I'm holding here, the SLR-105A1, would come out. These would have the converted or the replaced front sight base. That was basically the change. But what's nice about the AK74 pattern is by just removing and replacing this one piece, you get 24mm threads and your bayonet lug back. I don't blame them for not going to the trouble of restoring the accessory lug. It looks neat, but it effectively does nothing. So that was the SLR-105A1, which came out in 2005. There was, of course, also a railed version known as the SLR-105A1R. And those are the 4 variants. This gun is just interesting because it was, as I said, the first in 5.45 and the first stamped gun for Arsenal to bring in. The neutered version, as I said, sold for about $500. The feature version was about $550. I ran into a couple of accounts of people buying them and they were paying about $550 in 2005 new. These would ship with 130 round Bulgarian mag, and they would have black polymer furniture, black handguards, shiny black pistol grip, and some sources say a NATO stock. When I received this one, it had a Warsaw. Either way, NATO or Warsaw link polymer stock. Now, I just recently purchased this one this summer. I thought having an AK74 import, this is really the only true, just standard AK74 to come in. And I thought it was a neat gun. One popped up, price was right, I liked the seller, he was friendly, knowledgeable on Kalashnikovs. I had a AK74 kit build from Ohio Rapid Fire, which had been a great gun, but I could sell it to fund this one, so that's exactly what I did. As I said in the AK74 video, I then purchased Russian furniture in used but good condition from Coolfire, who's also on Gun Broker. His first name's Orlando. If you've dealt with him, he's been very fair to me. And he sent me this set, and so I put Russian furniture on it. And for this video, I stuck the Bakelite mag in it. So now we have pretty much an exact semi-auto only version of a 1980s Russian AK74. Similar to what would have been used in Afghanistan. Also, I have a Russian sling on it. Originally, these would come with a Bulgarian sling cleaning kit. The cleaning kit is the tube style in the buttstock and an oil bottle. And what's funny is, in 2005, people thought $550 for a Kalashnikov, even an Arsenal, was outrageous. That was a lot of money. So these did not sell that great. Plus 5.45 had yet to really catch on. The surplus had not really come into the country in large numbers yet. I remember at the time I owned a Romanian SAR-2, and for the ammo for it I had to buy Wolf, which was imported about twice a year. So the ammo, while not expensive, you had to buy a couple of cases at a time if you wanted to have enough to shoot for 3 or 4 months. So these guns were kind of a flash in the pan. I don't know how many were imported for sure. Arsenal is notoriously tight-lipped about how many guns come in. But I've read numbers from 200 to 400. In general, I know that Arsenal does not bring in as many guns as people think. They were actually a pretty small outfit, and they were even smaller back in 2004, 2005. In fact, back then, Arsenal sold direct. You know, today they sell a lot through KVAR. Back in 04, 05, one of their major and one of their few distributors was Lou Horton up in Massachusetts, who I still purchase from in my business, a good company, and this isn't a plug for them, they've just always been good. But back then, Arsenal mostly sold direct and sold a few special editions through Lou Horton. But it was a really different time. I'm going to do a video on the history of Arsenal at some point, getting into different variations. But I really wanted to highlight the SLR-105 because I think it's a really neat version. Also interesting, in late 04, they said they were going to do a side-folding version of this. And they were going to call it the SLR-105S. At that time, they were going to use S to designate side-folding. It never came out, at least then. We finally did receive it in 2013, late 2013, early 2014, as the SLR-104FR, which many of you probably know. So it took basically just under 10 years, a decade, to get the side-folding version of this out. Unfortunately, the fixed stock version, the 105, seems to have disappeared after 2005. All the ones I've seen have a 2004 Trunnion date. That's not to say that there aren't some 2005 dates, but it looks like they only imported a batch or two. And then after those finally sold through about 2006, they didn't import more. There was a small batch a few years ago sold by KVAR. I believe it was around 2012, guys. I might be off by a year or two there. But there was a very small batch of about 2 dozen. But these were not new 105 imports. They were just old stock that they found in the back while cleaning the warehouse. I know that seems funny to think that you can mislay guns for a few years, but it happens when you have a large warehouse. I mean, a gun's a small thing. So to have a few boxes stuck back, also what importers will do, they will intentionally stick back a few guns for warranty repair purposes. You know, someone might send in a gun in 2007 saying something's wrong with it, they get it, they can't fix it, and they need to replace it. So a lot of importers will hold back a few guns for that purpose for a few years. I know Century does as well. So a few of these were sold basically as new old stock about 5 years ago, but that was the last of the 105s to come out of Arsenal directly. I really like this gun, as I said. I'm even happy that it's not the railed model, because most standard AK74s did not have the side rail. I have other guns, including my 104FR, that do have the rail, so it was kind of nice to have one that didn't. Just a really sleek, streamlined gun. As you saw at the beginning of this video, we were firing it, and it pretty much fires like a AK74. Very little muzzle rise, minimal felt recoil with the muzzle brake on. Good balance. This one has a very nice trigger. It is a US trigger group in it, but it's back when Arsenal was still putting very nice triggers in. Interestingly, it's made about the same as the newer triggers that they started using about 2007 through until last year, but it's just much more polished up. I think it might even still be machined versus cast. As far as the bolt travel, it's smooth. It's not as smooth as, say, a milled gun, of course, because we have a stamped receiver. But this is a really well put together gun. Everything is straight. The rivets are done nicely. We have all the correct features. Now, one final point before we go. One thing that's talked about on these quite a bit. I'll just pop the cover off. I think that's the easiest way to show this. Is what is called a double rivet trunnion. If you look in here, sorry, it's probably a little dirty because we just got through shooting it. You'll see 2 rivets at the feed ramp there. Most of the SLR-105s I've heard about, where they've actually talked about their trunnions, have the double rivet. It is said that is a Russian trunnion because of that. And people point to the fact that Tula made that style in the late 80s. I have no reason to doubt them. The theory as to what happened, as I said, up until the SLR-105, Arsenal, Bulgaria had been sending milled receiver guns in 7.62-39 over to the U.S. They had also started to do some in 5.56 NATO, 223, all new production. But when Arsenal Incorporated, Arsenal Las Vegas, asked for some 5.45s, well, Arsenal Bulgaria had not done a 5.45 rifle in at least a decade at that point. So, they made new parts as needed, but they happened to have a box of virgin unused parts that had been sent over from Russia in the late 80s, maybe early 90s, very early 90s. And so they went in and they grabbed those virgin parts, refinished them out, you know, drilled them and used them in these rifles. So it's an interesting story. If true, that means SLR-105s have some Russian parts in them, even if they're finished out in Bulgaria. That's another reason I went ahead and put Russian furniture on this. I thought it was quite fitting. So it's kind of a Bulgarian-Russian hybrid. A lot of the Bulgarian AK74s and AKS74 kits that have come in over the years have proven to have a lot of Russian parts in them because, you know, Russia sent over what they had excess and Bulgaria built using them. That's really it. A lot of you know the 104. This is pretty much the same quality level, honestly. I know the 105s are kind of legendary, and while this is a very nice gun, it's like any other gun. You know, it's a military production style, so it has a lot of the same quality as the 104 FR. The front end is virtually the same, except not having the accessory lug. The receiver is the same, except this one doesn't have the rail. Of course, now we have the standard 74 rear trunnion for a fixed stock, and we do not have the grip reinforcing plate because we don't have a folding stock. Other than that, they're pretty much the same as the 104. Just thought we'd share this with you. We'd love to hear about your own SLR-105s. They're interesting guns, and a lot of the information out there is very anecdotal, so please share your own stories of when you bought them. I'm ashamed to say this one, when these were new, passed me by. I did own a 5.45 back in 2004, 2005, and I bought my first Arsenal in 2004. It was a SAM 5R. I bought it right after the AUB sunset. I was actually in Russia late that year. I ordered it, and then when I came back in early 05, it was at my friend's FFL shop that I worked at a little bit at the time. But so I did own Arsenals. I was aware of them, but I just, for whatever reason, the 105 passed me by back then. It just flew over my head, or I wasn't looking in the right section of their website. It was early days, but I was really fortunate to pick this one up, and I thought the gentleman asked a very fair price, and it's worth noting that for quite a long time these were going for pretty high money because they were the closest thing to a true 74 to come in. But then we had the SLR-104 FRs, before that the SGL-31s, both fixed and side folders. So over the years the costs on the 105s have stabilized out and even come down a little bit. But if you're looking for a factory 5.45 gun, I highly recommend, if you run across one of these, to give it a go. I also would not encourage you to heavily modify it. I don't mind putting different furniture on. I can put the black on and back very easily, but I would not chop barrels or drill and tap for rails and stuff, because these are semi-collectible. Well, really appreciate you tuning in. If you have any questions, please post them below. If you liked the video, please click like, and please also check out some of our other Arsenal type videos and AK videos if you're interested in the subject. And if you haven't already subscribed and would like to do so, we'd love for you to do that too. This is Misha, and we'll catch you next time.